Don't forget about the law. Between 1940 and 1946, Thomas Mann, who had arrived as a refugee in the United States in 1938, pleaded for democracy in 55 speeches recorded in California. Now there's an update at the Thomas Mann House in Pacific Palisades. Different voices, the same theme, democracy, and very topical. Because as there had been in the 1940s, there is today again cause for great concern for a democracy worthy of the label. At best, this kind of democracy is what law enables and secures, and more precisely, what fundamental human rights stand for and rules for truly democratic politics backed up by truly independent courts. When we talk about democracy today, this is what we must also account for. So don't forget about the law. However, law is often not much of a topic when it comes to democracy. But the law has a place in the Thomas Mann House as well. Because the Nobel laureate was not alone. When it comes to great men, the women are often forgotten. But without Katja, who had married him, Thomas would have been utterly lost. There were children too, Golo and Klaus. And there was Erika, the daughter. Erika Mann, not just the daughter. The actress who ran a political cabaret, the writer, the activist. Erika Mann returned to Germany to attend the Nuremberg trials convened to hold Nazi war criminals accountable in 1945. And she brought two things to the fore, that we are all different but can come together, and that law matters. And she was right. Difference must not be divisive but can be accounted for. And democracy is also, if it deserves the label, about law. And law must also be properly understood. Human beings necessarily exist in social relationships, says the German Federal Constitutional Court, which is why freedom is key, but always already limited. Your freedom extends as far as that which others can rightly claim for themselves. How else are we supposed to deal with each other civilly? This is why Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant coined the general law of laws that way. You may act in such a way that the free use of your will can coexist with the freedom of everyone. Again, properly understood, freedom is not raw autonomy, but linked to equality. And this informs democracy as a society of equals. Therefore, freedom of expression, of assembly, of association are all equal liberties for all of us, proportionally limited. This is what the law says in Germany, in South Africa, in Canada, in Strasbourg with the European Convention of Human Rights, and in many more places today. The US today is a bit of an outlier. Rights are not trump cards, as an American legal philosopher had it. And freedom of speech or right to bear arms cannot justify harm or even killing others, but must be understood with its limitations. Also, rights to education and voting rights cannot ignore but must respond to inequalities. Raw liberty is not enough. This is what courts around the world explain and defend, and then democracy profits from law, rights, rules. They help us coexist. This is the core of national constitutions in line with regional and global pacts on human rights. We, the people. This is the American overture. How can we make sure that everyone is truly included in this we? Human dignity, freedom, equality, the first three articles of the German Basic Law. How can these rights be turned into lived reality? It is not easy. There is today an authoritarian temptation in the US and Germany, as well as in other countries, with new leaders, Führer. For them, not everyone belongs to the we, the people, and they are not fond of human rights. To them, globalization is nice for shopping, but please no more. All limited to make America great again, a twisted call for a future in the past, or the slogan of the German right-wing AfD, Germany, but normal. How can we hold up to oppose that? It is not easy. The autocrats use democracy in order to destroy it. They get elected the first time and then hold unfair and fake elections to stay. Russia's President Putin is a prime example, but recent changes to voting laws in the US do also raise concerns. And the autocrats use the law to abuse it. They change the constitution to stay in office forever. They change voting laws. They modify rules for constitutional courts to have their ways without review, or they hijack the courts. This is what the autocratic peace did in Poland, and this is the goal of an ongoing arch-conservative strategy to take over courts in the US. Clearly, the law matters for democracy. This is what Erika Mann brought to the fore. Erika Mann also talked about democracy. Thomas Mann toured many US cities in 1938, the coming of democracy, and he recorded his 55 speeches. Friedemann spoke in the US and Canada, democracy will win. But Erika Mann used her voice as well. She started in 1937 in Madison Square Garden, boycott Nazi Germany, and she added hundreds of talks. A long, slender Amazon, as Friedemann describes her, who, unlike her father, woke up very early and eventually politicized him. And she added two things. Difference must not be divisive, and law matters. Erika Mann was different, but she also belonged to a family, to those committed to democracy. She herself was the target of discrimination in many ways. The Nazis hated her for her politics, her Jewish relatives, and because she loved women, too. As Frido said, she paid a price for that. And this was and is not identity politics, but life, conditioning experience as different. Erika did not use labels, but she lived it. Today one could call her elegantly queer. Erika Mann also thought and acted feminist, also not using the label. But she saw the private as political, as do women's movements around the world. The only principle, she wrote, that I adhere to is my stubborn belief in a few basic moral ideals: truth, honor, decency, freedom, tolerance. Hence in 1943 she wondered about me of all people. And she acted concerned, which is one way of being political. The stubborn belief informed a direct, unvarnished appeal to human solidarity, because we are in it together, undivided. What brings compassion, Erika wondered, when a democracy is threatened, violated, or extinguished? A sense of solidarity that unites all the children of Democrats, she says, that hurts all of them when one is hurt and comforts all of them when one has reason to rejoice. In one world. She cited to President Roosevelt's For Freedom speech in 1941. We now live in one world. As Erika had it, we differ, but we belong together. And Erika Mann made a second point. She understood the role law plays for democracy: rights, rules, courts. A democracy worthy of the label needs them. There are the ones, she said, who proclaim that might comes before right. But we must see, she said, that might is only there to enforce the law. And she knew what she was talking about. Erika Mann returned to Germany and was the only accredited woman to attend the Nuremberg trials. There, in 1945, for the first time ever, representatives of an unjust state were indicted before an international court. And for the first time, they were charged with crimes against humanity, which is more than, as Hannah Arendt emphasized, crimes against humankind, and it is now in the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court. This was not only law on the books, but law at work. Erika Mann herself, persecuted and displaced, but also an actress who had run a theater, expected more drama. But this trial, she said, was intended less for the excitement and entertainment of the present than for instruction of the future, for history. Anyone hoping for a grand reckoning, for sensation due to the sensational nature of the facts, was thus bound to be disappointed. In the end, though, as Erika pointed out, the law does have great advantages. So what are they? She saw the Nuremberg trial as the gala premiere for hundreds of smaller productions in other theaters to come. And indeed, a play must be put into the repertoire to be a success. In addition, it matters how law really works. Erika traveled to Luxembourg, where the defendants were awaiting trial, and saw these men as perpetrators as well as nervous human beings. In Nuremberg, she also saw the other side, the prosecutor, the judges, as people, professionals responsible. She says the stars will be playing for their lives. The servants of the law, who will decide the outcome, are less spectacular. That matters too. For sure, there is the grand opening by Robert Jackson, the chief prosecutor. He was clear that this is not a victor's court, but about justice, and that the true defendant is civilization. But then came, as Erika put it, the difficulties throughout, the tremendously conscientious and sometimes perhaps pedantic ways in which this tremendous wealth of factual material is presented calmly and undramatically. But this has, she added, great merit. The need for evidence to counter the presumption of innocence, as well as handling the defendant's tricks, taking advantage of rights that they themselves had previously trampled on. This is all needed. Or as Michelle Obama said in 2016, when they go low, we go high. When the abuse of law is brought to court, the law must prove itself to do justice to justice. And all this is topical. We need not forget about that. After 1945, we agreed on human rights and democracy. Whatever the differences between the world's legal systems, this is one world. And like the Mann family in California, we are different, but we live together. Since 1945 and repeated since, this is the never again, the commitment to dignity, freedom, equality, also together, not apart. This is what the German Basic Law says in the year of its 75th birthday. This is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, turning 76. Human dignity, freedom, and equality, the post-World War II consensus. The US Constitution is older, and it took a while to add amendments to ensure democracy for all. But US law also guarantees due process and the equal protection of the laws for all its citizens, including, it needed to be added, women. The we the people is no we under conditions of slavery and patriarchy. Equality helps no one if it is merely formal, and liberty is a raw trump if not proportionally limited. Empty promises serve as decorum for unjust autocratic states. We must make sure that does not happen. Law can inform and safeguard a vibrant democracy, and courts, if truly independent, are the safety belt. To protect democracy, we should therefore, like Erika Mann, not lose sight of the law. She would have added that it is not only the gala premiere that counts. The rule of law also thrives on the smaller performances. In Poland, judges on ordinary courts used their way to Europe to help restore the rule of law. In the US, independent prosecutors and judges have a former president stand trial. And in countries where courts have not been hijacked, the judiciary takes a stand against hatred and violence, against the abuse of freedom, and it undoes inequalities, not bowing to political pressure. Not every performance is convincing, but courts are places in democracy for all to be heard, and for power to be limited. This is precisely why autocrats attack them. They hijack courts to get away with anything. To stay with the image, they turn theater into a propaganda performance. That would not have impressed Erika Mann. It would have worried her. Democracy needs fundamental rights and rules for truly democratic procedures, and it needs the venues of law, including independent courts. Frido says of Erika Mann, when there were threats, she stood up to them. She politicized the reluctant father who had famously declared in 1918 to be a non-political man, a book he did not allow to be translated into English during his lifetime. Erika changed that. Klaus couldn't have done that on his own. Erika was energetic, Frido tells us. She had this awareness that you want to stand up for something, to fight something negative. So don't forget about the women. Don't turn our differences into discrimination, and don't forget the law. Very topical indeed.